Hello guys, so the Bogoljubov defense, it must be the trickiest variation to play against 1d4 by white. I mean, I already made 6 videos about exploring the hundreds of traps that arise from this opening, and just as we all thought that all the traps have been explored, then the old Bogoljubov hits us with yet another super tricky variation. And this one is funny because it's white trying to go for tricks of their own, and we counter hit them with our tricks. So let's see this. So 1d4, knight to c6, and now bishop to f4. Looks like your opponent is going for a London system, but after knight to f6 they develop knight to c3. So if you ever see these two pieces coming out this way early in the opening, it can be with a different move order as well, you can be pretty much sure that your opponent is going for a trick of theirs. Let me show you what I mean. So here after pawn to d5, more than 60% of your opponents will go knight to b5. They want to hit this c7 pawn early in the opening to create some complications. And I mean, it usually works well for white and they score pretty good in this line. So that's why I'm here to show you how to counterattack this. First of all, we want to go pawn to e5, blocking the bishop, and now bishop captures is the correct move, but most guys will capture with their pawn. And don't worry, we will get to all those correct lines later. And now here we are going to play pawn to a6. So they are hitting our knight, but we are hitting their knight. And the correct move here for them is to retreat the knight back to c3, but most guys are going to grab our knight. So we are going to grab their knight, and here they really shouldn't, but most guys are going to capture this, because they can bear the pressure of two pawns staring at each other. Yeah, so f captures on g7, and now we can recapture with our bishop. Now they shouldn't really be afraid of this, but most guys are, and most guys will play pawn to c3 to block our bishop. But now we can respond with pawn to d4, and once again they shouldn't really capture this, but most guys do. We can capture with the queen, they will capture the queen, we will capture with our knight, and now we are threatening to go knight to c2 and fork the king and the rook, so the response is pretty much logical, and most people play rook to c1. But now we can grab the a2 pawn, and here is where they finally play a correct move in most cases, which is pawn to e3, but it's already too late and we will be winning a piece very soon. So we can go knight to b3 and hit the rook. They will usually capture this pawn, and now we bring our rook to the back rank with a check. King to e2 is forced, and now bishop to e6. So now we are threatening to just simply win a piece like this, and there is not a good way to stop this. Usually they just grab this pawn, which quickens this process, and if they play the engine line, which is knight to h3, trying to support the bishop with their rook, here we can still hit them with the bishop to c4 check, and after the king runs somewhere, I mean it is forced to go to f3, now we can hit them with knight to d2 check, and we will be winning the piece like this. Alright, so going back to the positions where I said white went wrong. For example, here I said they shouldn't really be scared of this, but most guys play pawn to c3. So what if they play the correct move, which is playing pawn to e3? Well, in this case this is going to be even easier for us to win, because all we have to do is grab the pawn on b2, hit the rook, and now like 97% of the time, and there is around 5,000 games here, they will play a rook to b1, which is a blunder costing them the game. Because we now have this deadly bishop to c3 check, we lurk out the king. Now we go rook captures on a2, infiltrating our rook in They usually collect these pawns. We develop our pieces. Bishop goes to f5. They can even collect this pawn, but we can develop our queen to f6. Now all of our pieces are developed in optimal spots, and there is like nothing to do for white here. One of the lines that the engine is recommending is to push pawn to e4, but we can give this check. They can block it, but we grab their dark square bishop, and if they dare to grab our bishop, then we can, for example, win the queen with rook to a1. And they cannot save the queen, because if it moves to safety, then this is checkmate in 1. Okay, so now let's go one more step back. I'm into this position after we recaptured their knight. I said here in this variation they shouldn't really capture this pawn, which is the most played move. But what if your opponent here plays correctly and in this position they push pawn to e3? Well, in this case you can capture the pawn with your queen, and now you are still on this b2 pawn. So I believe one of two things will happen. They will either get scared and push pawn to c3, or they will play the correct move bishop captures on b5. So if they push pawn to c3, you can still hit them with pawn to d4. Most guys will capture, or capturing with this pawn hangs a bishop. So c captures, and now bishop to b4, deadly check again. They have to move the king, and now you can go full nuts with bishop to g4 check, and if they block with the pawn, you just get castled. At this point you don't really care about material. They can capture the bishop, and you can even give up your rook here. After they capture it, knight captures. The engine here is yelling that white need to give the queen to survive a little bit longer, because otherwise, I mean, this is hanging. If they try to come up with their king to save the bishop, then this rook is coming here and you still win the bishop. Well, yeah, that's like -8 or something, this position. Alright, so let's go back. I mentioned the correct move here is not to be scared about this diagonal, but capture with the bishop on b5. So here you can grab the pawn on b2 with your queen, and in this position rook to b1 is the move they should play, after which you would have to move your queen somewhere, and this would result in them having a slightly worse position, and they would survive the tricks. But the thing is that most guys here try to throw in this smart looking in between move and capture the knight on c6 with check, which is a mistake. And after we recapture, this is now -2 for black, and on top of it most guys will see that this is hanging and they go right after the pawn. Now their position is dead lost once again, because here we can simply develop our bishop to f5, and we have kind of an unstoppable threat of capturing on c2. I don't see a good way for white to deal with this threat, and if they play rook to b1 here, we can first capture on a2, and there is just not a good move for white in this position. It has been reached a few times on lichess, and most guys went for rook to b8 check, trying to exchange the rooks, which only made things worse for them, because after this they're still gonna be hit with bishop to b5 check, and once they move their king, now we can capture on c2, and if they try to preserve the queen, she will not last very long because of this check, and after king to f3 we will collect the queen like this. Okay, let's rewind back to the point where they captured our knight right here. So I mentioned that the correct play here is actually to retreat knight to c3. Here you can play knight to h5 and hit the bishop. Now the correct play for them would be to capture this pawn and protect the bishop, but again most guys will fall for a trap and slide bishop to g3 like they are used to. But here you can hit them with pawn to d4. Now they should retreat the knight, but nobody plays that. They will go forward, You develop your bishop to f5, hitting the knight once again. At this point, usually they get tired of moving their pieces around in the opening and they will play pawn to f3 to protect the knight, which is a losing blunder. Not that it wasn't lost even before this. But here you capture the knight, they recapture, and you first get rid of this bishop, and once they recapture, bishop to f4 check. If the king happens to run away, then queen to g5 is threatening a checkmate right here, and the engine is suggesting to play queen to c1, which will try to stop the mate, but you can simply play bishop to d2, blocking the queen, and now they just have to give up the queen. And if they don't run the king away but play pawn to c3, you can capture. They can exchange the queens, but it doesn't matter. In this position, you are simply threatening to capture this with this card check and make a new queen. And even if they try to run to f2 now, well, you can just grab this. They can block this, but you will eventually have enough pieces to support this pawn and eventually make a new queen. Alright guys, let's rewind all the way back, and now let me show you the refutation of this whole opening. That is, after they successfully found this retreating move, and once we hit their bishop, they will play the correct move and capture this pawn. So now white has like a advantage around +1, and there is one final trick that I am not really sure anybody will fall for, but let me just show you because it's a funny line. So here we can continue with playing bishop to e6. They will most likely play pawn to e4. We can capture the bishop, they will recapture, and now queen to e7. Now if they capture this bishop, that's the point of our queen being here, we can recapture with the queen, and that will be almost equalized. And if they play the second most played move, which is knight to f3, a simple development, now we can hit them with queen to b4 check. And if they happen to block this check with their pawn, now we capture on e4, not only a check but also hitting this knight, so they would have to use it to block this check. Now we hit them with a funny knight to b4. This move comes with a lot of pressure, mainly, threatening this, and all sorts of stuffs. And if they capture the knight, then we can capture with the bishop, and now there is no way for them to save the king, but to give up the queen. Alright guys, there is one more variation we didn't talk about, and it was right in the beginning. I mentioned here capturing with the pawn is not correct and they should capture with the bishop. So let's see this. Bishop captures. Well, we are of course going to grab the bishop, and once they recapture, now we still play pawn to a6. The correct move here for white is once again to retreat the knight back to c3, but it's not very popular move. Of course, most guys are going to be grabbing this. And there are also those smart guys who will try to just throw in an intermezzo move, because as they see the knight will be lost anyways, they will try to win at least a pawn for free, right? Well, it doesn't work, because if they capture here, we capture the knight, they will of course capture this knight, but now bishop to b4 check. They can block this, but we capture, they capture, and we recapture with the queen. And as you can see, we are winning plenty of material here. So let's go back and let's see what happens if they play e captures on f6. Well, of course, we will grab their knight, and now once again, like more than 70% will just simply grab this pawn as they cannot bear the tension. But it is a mistake, because now we are once again on this nice long diagonal. And if they get scared and play pawn to c3, well, we hit them with pawn to d4. And once this trade happens, it may not appear as much, but we are winning. Well, we are hitting this pawn first of all, so let's say they move the rook to b1. Now we can hit the rook with bishop to f5. And what do they do here? Well, let's say they slide the rook to c1. Now we just simply protect our pawn as it was hit. And what do they do? The engine is suggesting like knight to f3, but we just grab on b2. They need to save the rook by playing rook to c5. And now we once again just retreat our bishop as it was hit by the rook. And we are still winning. Let's say they push pawn to e3 to try to develop stuff. Well, we just capture the pawn on a2, and the position is so lost for white here that the engine is recommending just sacrificing a bishop on b5. Alright, let's go back a little bit. How about they don't play rook to b1 here, but they get castled? Seems interesting, right? Because now they hit the bishop. Well, look at this. We grab the pawn on a2 and we don't care about the bishop, because if they grab it, we hit them with this check. Now the king needs to move and we win their bishop. And on top of everything, now they have pretty hard time developing as they cannot move the knight. Yes, technically they can deal with this with playing rook to d1, but it will cost them a few pawns and we still have a winning position. Alright guys, now let's go back. And in the case of them not being scared of this and not playing c3 but playing correctly pawn to e3, now we can hit them with bishop captures on b2. And once again, it's so counterintuitive, but the rook to b1 is a blunder, losing them the game. Thanks to this bishop to c3 check, lurking out the king, and the position is like -6 something for black. Alright guys, I gotta go. I hope you had some fun. I hope you will play this Bogoljubov Mikenas Defense. I hope you will have great success with this. And yeah, I don't know what else to say. I should perhaps work on my outros. Have a great day. Bye.